Welcome to Mindful Pathway, where science and soul start their journey.
And as we know, with every great journey begins the search for a mentor, some insights, some wisdom. And that's our goal with this podcast, is to create a platform where we can invite listeners to get that wisdom through our guests, through their journeys as well, through their learnings from life's challenges. And that's our goal today with Nick Jonsson, our first guest.
Today's topic affects so many, but is really rarely openly discussed: men's mental health. Behind leadership, success, family, and strength, men often suffer in silence, and this impacts their families and their loved ones. My name is Marissa.
And I'm Dr. Glenn Graves. It gives me great pleasure to have Nick Jonsson here on our show today. And I'd like to share just briefly that, it's a rare occasion when a psychologist can actually introduce a former client due to confidentiality and protecting their privacy. However, in this case, we could say Nick Jonsson has boldly declared it to the whole world in his international bestseller that has gone around the world on many platforms and is helping a lot of people at this moment. It's called Executive Loneliness. I actually have a copy today and I'll share with you later. But
Nick has become a leading advocate for men's mental health, especially within the leadership space. Besides that, he's the author of the international bestseller Executive Loneliness, which has ranked #1 in men's health and mental health in countries such as the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. He's a world-class speaker, coach, triathlete, and always helps find connection beyond success. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
We're very excited to have you here today.
So am I.
okay, Nick, well, as I mentioned, I kind of met you midway through your mental health journey. You had sought help before you found me. And I'd just like to help the listeners understand how that journey begins. How does one understand that they might need help? And then how do they go about asking for that help and starting that process?
Yeah, indeed, I met you halfway, but it was a painful journey before that. And for the longest of the time, I was keeping it all inside me, bottling it all up until I couldn't anymore. I guess many of us, we have to hit our own rock bottom before we're willing to seek help. And although I wish I asked for help earlier, it was really when I was so sick that I was sick and tired of it. And at that time, I started to ask for help. At that time, it was someone I met who's my wife today, Donna, who was by my side. And I just decided to speak honestly about my feelings and how I was internally. And that started my recovery journey. From that on, then, I saw doctors. Indeed, I also joined a 12-step program to get help to sober up there. And about 2 years in my journey, I met you, and you are part of my recovery journey, which led me to where I am today.
Nick, can you maybe take us to the beginning? What happened?
Yeah, I was a high-achieving executive, really striving to hit the targets, deliver on the KPIs and impress the bosses. I was very driven. So in the corporate ladder, I started as an account executive, but I already looked at the managing director position. I knew and I studied how to make it happen. I've done account manager, account director, general manager, managing director, and so on, and then bigger roles, bigger budgets. And I think it's many of us who define ourselves in our role. And for 10 years, that was a very exciting journey. But once I reached the top, I started to feel quite isolated, quite lonely. And I was questioning myself, what have I done with my life in these 10 years? And with that, I resigned from this job. With that, when I came home and my ex-wife challenged me, I wasn't ready to discuss it. Instead, I filed for a divorce as well. And that led me to a very isolated place, jumping from job to job, failing everything I did. So that was sort of that place when I then turned, you could say I traded my gym membership for a bar stool, and my social circle moved from sport into the bar scene and drinking, medicating myself because I couldn't cope with what had happened. I was then also separated from my son, who moved with my ex-wife to Sweden. So that was when I was really in a bad spot.
It sounds like there was a time when you had to face lots of challenges. And like you said, there was this turning point where you felt you had to redefine your priorities. And did you confide in anyone, or was it hard for you to find somebody who you could trust?
Well, interestingly, at that time, I was a general manager managing hospitals and clinics. So I was working with some of the best doctors in the world on a day-to-day basis. And I was already fit. I was running marathons, doing triathlons, and the doctors and so on, we were checking our blood and looking at those things all the time. And I was the fittest of all of them.
Yeah.
And so, it's quite ironic that I was the one who falls sick. But of course, you cannot see how you feel internally and the mental side on a blood test. You're able to trick anyone. And so that's how it sort of started, by living in this sort of lie, turning up as someone who I wasn't, not having someone I spoke with honestly how I felt internally. And then for a few years having bottled this up and just getting sicker and sicker, and with an unhealthy diet and alcohol and not asking for help, eventually something had to give. And at the darkest moment, and I remember being in Singapore in April 2018, my left foot was so swollen that I couldn't even put on a shoe. It was later diagnosed as a psychosomatic illness. So that's the stage of having, when you bottle up so much and you don't release anything, it had to go somewhere, and all that went in my foot. And that was when I thought that life was over. I thought I was going to die. And still at that time, I didn't yet seek for help.
That is so interesting that you are able to share this now so openly with us, and also that it really materialized in a physical illness, that mental health struggle that you had to go through, that all of that energy bottled up went physically somewhere. And I think this is also something that is still very hard for people to believe, that if you don't really process what's going on within you, that energy will manifest somewhere.
Yeah. So let's say that that's rock bottom then. What was the moment when you found this spark of energy that said, hey, let's not do this, let's think of something else? That adaptive instinct that obviously you have, when did that ignite?
Yeah, so that day then, when I decided to open up and I shared how I felt internally to Donna, then I remember over about half an hour as I shared, something happened inside me. And you can imagine if I bottled everything up for the last 3 years being very sick, and before that not shared for many years about my feelings, once you open up, it's like you're releasing something. It's almost like you open a can of Coke, you will hear that sound. Well, I felt like that internally. It was like something opened up, and I could start to feel electric as I was speaking. And it's like that saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. That's how I felt.
Right.
So I came to life pretty much right away. And for every time I shared my story after that, and it didn't matter if it was my wife or my doctor or a psychotherapist or a counselor, it didn't matter. It was someone there listening and giving me a chance to speak up and taking ownership for what it was. That was the beginning of the healing. That was on one-on-one level. But then a year into my recovery, something happened that changed everything. I lost a friend in Singapore to suicide. And with that, I also asked myself and wondering how close to this was I? Because this, where I was and where I was heading, I have no idea where that could have ended up. But with that, then I decided to really start speaking up more about this. Until then, it was in a protected bubble for 1 year. I was just working on my recovery one-on-one. But then as I was grieving the loss of my friend, I set up a fund to raise money and awareness for suicide prevention. I also became a volunteer for SOS Samaritans. And with that, my story was public.
And how did that feel, that finally your story was public? As you said, you were sharing this. Were you afraid of judgment, or were you afraid that people would see you in a different light? Because I imagine that is also like one of these reasons why men don't want to speak up about this, why men don't necessarily seek help in the first place, because there's a certain social image that we're trying to keep up, right? That powerful, strong leader of the family. And how did that feel when suddenly everything was out in the open?
Yeah, I was terrified. And if you think about all the 12-step recovery groups and so on. Many of them, or most of them, have the word anonymous. And we were told that this recovery is something secret. We must not speak about it. And as I was also seeing some therapists and counselors in town, I looked on Facebook to check in on the location when I was waiting for them, and there might have been 2 or 3 people in the history who checked in on this location. Compare that with a fitness center or a yoga center, it would be thousands. So clearly people do everything to mask this up. I don't think I might have ever shared my story if it wasn't that I was in a complete shock and in terror, having lost my friend to suicide. And I remember calling up his family, calling his brother in the UK also at that time, and asking, what can we do? How can I help? And there wasn't much I could do, but that's when I decided to make a video, which I posted on YouTube, and I posted it on LinkedIn, where I shared a bit about my story and the fund that I set up then for the Samaritans to raise money. And I went out for a run, come back to my computer an hour later, and this clip had gone absolutely viral, shared hundreds of times, and hundreds of people have been writing to me. And the next day also I received interviews with Money FM. The Straight Times ran a full page. The Business Times ran a full pages feature in Singapore, which according to my research is the biggest mental health related media exposure in the history of this country. So with that, I couldn't hide anyway. I had no choice. And many people said, Nick, you're completely insane. You're going to destroy your career. You will never be able to get a job again. And when they start to say that, of course, I got a lot of doubts and I wanted to sort of stop, but it was too late. And I had something inside me driving me towards the course, though, because I almost felt I have to do this. Because the journalists even said in Singapore, we want to talk about this, but we haven't found anyone we can interview for years. Thank you for stepping forward.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
There's one thing I don't want to get too far away from, though, that's important about what you just shared, Nick. When I've passed on your book to other clients, anytime someone comes in my office, I got a whole stack of them, and someone mentions any struggle with anxiety, depression, loneliness, alcohol, I pull out the book and pass it to them, and they'll feed back to me. And one of the most intense features of the book is that section on depression and suicidal ideation. They say it's really heavy for them to see it up front, but I think that's also the moment when they can also see that existential choice, you know what I mean? And I think in a human there's this instinct for survival, but there's also an instinct to thrive, right? And when someone hits rock bottom, it's when you find out if you have that instinct, right? I guess your friend chose that choice, right? Unfortunately, but you chose a different path, and I think that's very important to show people there is another path, another way. And that instinct for survival is what is going to take you forward, which I found very clearly when we did EMDR. Remember when we did EMDR therapy? EMDR relies on a person's natural ability to adapt and survive by pulling in their creative resources. So it pulls in your smartest mind, your most creative mind, and says, what are the options here? How many ways can we find our way out of this? Not only to survive, but to thrive. And Nick, you were very good at EMDR. He has a very creative mind, very adaptive nature. So that's why we always did EMDR so easily. You know, 1 session, 2 sessions, you could shift completely and be in that better place. So that's a testament to your survival instincts, your thriving instincts, your creativity as well. So good on you.
Maybe before we go on, can you tell our listeners what is EMDR if they are not familiar with EMDR in the first place?
Okay. True enough, at the time, Nick and I did it, which was, 10 years ago already, probably, huh?
It is. It was 2019, 2020.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it was still kind of an unknown to most people. So people weren't asking for EMDR. No one was saying, can I have EMDR therapy? It was just a process that some therapists knew about and some would practice. It's been around for 30 years, but it's something I've done more than 20,000 times with clients and really believe in its ability to shift a core belief. That's the goal. Get out of a faulty belief like I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I will fail, these kind of negative faulty beliefs. We can flip that on its head, a 180 turn in a very short time, just by allowing a person to tap into their own resource, their own creative, adaptive nature. using several methods, eye movement. So the original EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And now we use different methods like tapping, bilateral tapping, to create the same effect. Interestingly enough, the original design was discovered while a woman was running. So that bilateral movement, the jogging, the bilateral movement, is what sends that signal to the brain. So many of the listeners would know when they're walking, paddling, swimming, running, their mind is starting to get sharper. They're starting to process things that they were struggling with. And isn't it interesting? Nick happens to also be a champion triathlete, so he's been doing EMDR every day, all day long, for like eons now. So that might be part of his story as well.
Yeah, I remember those sessions. They were very powerful because when I came to you, there was still quite a few painful moments in my life. There was those perhaps challenging times that I was looking back at. Still, I had still some resentments. I was let go twice from 2 different companies, and I still held quite some resentments. And I remember you took me back to those times and really neutralized that. And I can remember walking out from you those days. I haven't had any negative thoughts about that anymore, and that made a big impact.
Good. Glad to hear that. And again, it's not me doing it, it's you. I'm just facilitating. Your mind is the one that went in and rewrote the script. That's the important thing to remember about EMDR. The person heals themselves by just tapping into that.
That's incredible. And like you said, also, it's like about these internal beliefs that many of us carry, like, I am worthless, I am not good enough. And that really shapes also your reality if you hold on to that. And if EMDR is like a therapeutic approach that can really rewrite this script for you, this is like powerful for a person's life trajectory.
Well, one of the ones I see the most in executives, and Nick already spoke to it, is I need to be perfect. Right? There's that high achieving, I have to be the master of the universe approach. And when you get there, or to get there, it obviously takes a toll on you, your family, your staff, micromanaging, needing it to be this way, a perfect way. So I'll have folks come in, they say, this is my situation. We discover it's a I need to be perfect problem. And we just flip it on its head. So that CEO can now say, I can be myself. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can let my staff do their job and let them make mistakes. I'll carry it with them. Family always thrives after that as well, because nobody's getting yelled at and everyone's working together. So yeah, it's powerful.
Absolutely. When we now basically go into like family and the relationships, I imagine how hard it must have been to carry all of these emotions and not being able to share them. And it had an impact on your relationship with your now ex-wife, with your son. Can you take us back to the impact that your mental health distress had on your family? Because I think this is something that many of the listeners will be able to resonate to, especially wives of high-achieving executives who are maybe experiencing that from a bystander point of view.
And they are mentioned in his dedication, by the way, in the book.
Yeah.
Dedication.
Yeah, so I think there wasn't much my ex-wife could do at all. I mean, she tried to question me, maybe she tried to help, but I was just gone. I was sick. I wasn't approachable by anybody, and I wasn't ready to get help. So that was the first issue. And secondly, then I'm glad that my ex-wife took responsibility for our son. They moved to Sweden from Indonesia then. And she did a great job raising him. But I was very distant for about 2-3 years. I didn't do much. And he was then, 8-9 years of age, my son. So it's not so easy from a distance either. The phone calls we had and so on didn't really last more than 2-3 minutes. And I remember walking off those calls feeling dreadful because I couldn't find a connection with my son over phone. To the point where I actually started to seek help, and I reached out to specialists in child psychology in Singapore. I saw a child psychologist, a female, on Orchard Road, who helped me through this phase, and she guided me through this, where it included asking my ex-wife for all the names of my son's friends, the name of the teachers, copies of his subjects, and so on, so I could study and understand about his life and get on a call and to at least be a bit curious. that helped me a little bit, but still wasn't enough. So I came back to this child psychologist who was surprised that I came there as an adult. Normally children would come there. But in this case, then the next step was to come into his world and be more curious. And with that, I learned to play Minecraft and started to build a relationship with him by playing games online. And eventually we set up 3-hour calls every Saturday, which I then heard from my ex-wife later on that it was the highlight of his week. So I managed again to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to find an expert out there who could help me with a particular problem, which I managed to turn around. And these days, my relationship with my ex-wife is better than when we were married, and my relationship with my son, who's now 16, is absolutely wonderful.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. It's really important for the whole family to also be vulnerable enough to repair a relationship. I think this is also another thing that people often don't talk about, because you have to apologize. You have to really own your mistakes and say, I want to move on from here with you. I want to rebuild this connection. And I know as an adult, I have made mistakes, and apologizing to a child is so important to the child as well.
But this also raises that point we were talking about earlier of how do people find therapy in the first place if men typically aren't searching it. So our main demographic of people calling for counseling are women, adult women, often married with children. So either they're calling for their child, calling for their husband, or calling for the marriage. So basically, it's not often that men would go seeking out counseling, much less seeking a child psychologist to work on their relationship with the child. That shows his innovative, creative nature, right? But again, that leads us back to that question. How do men make that first step? How do they be open to it? Is there anything you can tell us from your journey now? You've talked to thousands, maybe millions of men at this point. What are they needing to get out of that?
Yeah, the key here is to build the relationships and the trust in seeking help in the good times. And we'll come into men's group later on, but that is certainly one aspect where I believe we need to belong to some kind of community where we practice. And I talk about the vulnerability muscle of getting used to talk about the small little problems, the small challenges we have, so that when something really bad hit us, we are ready and we share with someone then. This is really hard for most men. They are not sharing anything. They're not sharing anything with a wife. They're not talking to anyone about the challenges. And I can say also that I had the Alcoholics Anonymous hotline in Singapore from time to time. And also there it was 90% basically women calling in about the husband. And it was very few occasions that even the husband would come forward to meet up. So suffering and isolation is sadly what too many do.
How would you maybe describe the first step that men can do for themselves? Picking up the phone is maybe even too hard for many. But what is it where you feel like these are like some points that men can reflect on, and these are the first internal steps that they can take to get to the vulnerable position?
Yeah, and a good first step can be to work with a coach, a life coach, to work on their life. Many men have a business coach already, perhaps at the office, and they are open about the challenges they have there. Then extend to a life coach where you work on everything from your relationships in your life, your health, and fun and recreation, finances, and so on. And set some goals all around. And of course, mental health is a part of that, and to discuss those things. That is one part, and definitely also can belong to some groups, and just to share what they can, what challenges they have and work on them. So you normalize being vulnerable and open about your challenges, and just like you have goals in your work, you can have goals for your personal life as well.
Well, if we think about it, most of human behavior is based on their motivation. So whatever you're motivated to do is likely going to be the result in that action. So what we could say is that in Nick's case, like when Nick and I started a support group, I think what we ran into, a lot of people making excuses. They couldn't get the time, they couldn't coordinate. So there wasn't the motivation there to really make it happen. I mean, we were showing up, it was a free group, and there was just a struggle to get it kicked off. And I think the motivation was missing. But I suppose when they find a guy like Nick who's, solid in his path, he's written books, he's a, well-known speaker, so they get the motivation. They say, okay, this could be worth my time, and then they show up. So you're running a support group as well for men, right? As I understand.
Still running, and actually we're meeting tonight 8 p.m. on Zoom. And the motivation is a factor. When it's too much pain, then they don't show up for that reason.
Right.
And when nothing is going on, then they don't show up. A typical example, when people do show up, it's perhaps when they lost their job. Because the pain is there, but the motivation is also to get a new job.
Right.
So in short, sadly, people are very selfish. And once they got a job, they're not there for the others either. It's about full circle giving back once you have something as well. But that is lacking.
Yeah. This comes back to that core belief. Again, if someone feels I'm shameful, I'm a loser, I'm worthless, their actual core belief is actually the motivation to sabotage themselves, to prevent them from getting that help. So that's the simple approach in therapy. If someone's coming in with an addiction issue, automatically I know there's a core belief driving that. Once we go in with that core belief and flip it to I'm lovable, I'm good and worthy as I am, I'm honorable, I'm fine as I am, then instantly they're wanting to be authentically flawed. Yeah, I'm flawed, but I'm a human and I'm proud of where I'm at on my journey, and they want to be authentic, and then they start to feel more engaged with life. So that's where the motivation can come back as well.
I think one interesting point that you bring is being authentic. Would you also say, because you have lived in Asia, you are originally from Sweden, how does culture play a role in how we see men and men seeking help in general?
Yeah, so culture, I would say in general, Westerners are more open than Asians. I can just speak about one recovery meeting I volunteered this morning at 6:30 at a meeting, and it was about 10 foreigners and 2 locals.
Okay.
And that's normally only 1 local. Also, so it is very rare that, you say, Asians open up. They hide it even more, sadly. But fortunately, it's changing slowly. But we need more people leading the way. We need more Asians to stand up, also to share their challenges.
I almost want to laugh because I had the opposite experience with a women's support group. So it was mostly expat women who were struggling with their partners who were cheating. So this was partners of sex addicts as a support group. And one woman came in who was Asian, and she just started cursing, started spouting out all the terrible things her husband done, and just kind of liberated the group. I mean, they all felt the same way. They all wanted to curse. Nobody was cursing, but this woman was saying it exactly the way she felt it, and that liberated the whole group. So I guess it's just some Asians and some Westerners who are not in the normal demographic.
But it's true. I think it's for especially like Asian men, they should also champion that. But there is like so much more cultural context with keeping a good image of the family, which their culture or society often like expects them to be the strong, powerful leader of many generations. And I think that is an extra burden that many carry. What could you maybe from your personal experience in your own lives, but also by leading all of these support groups and what you've heard from other men's stories, what are some first signs or symptoms in that case where something is off? Maybe many men are just not aware of it as well. Maybe just many feel like, oh, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Is this what my life is, or is this what life is supposed to be like? So what would be like some first signs?
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at my own case, I gained about 30 kilos. I stopped exercising completely. This didn't happen overnight, but over 1 or 2 years, that was the direction. So I think we can look out for, people we know, if you gain a lot of weight or lose a lot of weight or lose complete interest. I think those are some of the warning signs that we can look in for our friends. But the issue is that many people are hiding it very good. And even though I gained weight and some people question it, I was able to turn it around and joke about it and just say, I've done too many marathons already. It's time to enjoy life. And, and no one would push harder. So it's really hard to know. So that's why I come back to that. I think we need to build up these support groups in the good times. And we all need to have these conversations in the good times. So we start really discussing the small little challenges So when something happens, we naturally share it. In my men's group, something that typically men are sharing, the ones who are inside the group, is the loss of a close one. So in my men's group, in the last year alone, 3 of them have lost the mother, and they have shared this. And we write a daily gratitude list as a form of practicing our vulnerability and to see the things we are grateful for. And I have shared mine now for almost 2 years every day, as to lead by example. And as they share the gratitude list around losing of the mother, one of them, for example, shared, I made it back to my home country, being there, holding my mother's hand before she passed away, able to be there to support a sister during this difficult time, able to be supporting the aftermath of selling the house, and so many things by twisting it and looking at the positives and the good memories of this person instead of all the dark side. And one particular guy here even found so much strength in this exercise, the fact that he was so open and vulnerable with us about it, and also shared on the call about it. He was able to put down all his thoughts into a letter which he could read at the funeral, something that he said he would never have done otherwise. He never done it in his life. But just the fact that in day by day he was reflecting and sharing with a group, then being vulnerable and seeing the response he got through that gave him that strength. And it's now a few months ago, the passing, and he got so much strength through this exercise that he also can apply it to other parts of his life. But if you don't have those groups, then naturally he said if he had not joined this group, he would have kept it just secret. No one would have known that even his mother would have passed, and he would just grind it through it in silence.
You have often spoken about the importance of belonging. We all want to belong to a family, to a community. It's a eternal human need that we have. And most often these men struggle in silence or don't have close friends that they're able to be vulnerable about. And I think you mentioned once that, you just mentioned that some people would maybe say, oh, you have gained weight, but nobody was pushing harder. Do you now look back and wish somebody pushed harder?
I don't think I was ready. Somehow it seems like we have to, hit our own rock bottom. I think I needed to really burn myself in order to be ready. But I hope that some other people don't go that far because it's too painful. And sometimes some people don't get away with it, being alive even.
That's the challenge as a therapist working with addiction, is when someone comes in, we have to sense what they need. And if we come in too strong, they'll run out of the session and never come back. You know what I mean? I don't mean literally run out, but they won't come back. And then some will be almost feeling too nurtured and too kind of cared for so that they don't actually take it serious. They're like, oh, they're going to take care of it for me. So it's very important for the therapist to know that nuance of that person and their journey and where they're at. Because you're right, nobody will change because you told them to, especially if it's someone in an abusive relationship. You can't tell them they're in an abusive relationship. They have to have enough is enough. They have to hit that wall. And with addiction, they have to hit that bottom and then be looking up before they can actually reach out for that help.
If loved ones are listening and they want to help, from your professional point of view, what can they do? Because some maybe don't have the opportunity to hit rock bottom. Some maybe don't have that time. And what can loved ones, family members do to intervene and help if the person who is in dire need of help is not willing to do so by themselves?
Yeah, that's a common call I get. I'll get a call from a woman who says, my husband is struggling with addiction. He doesn't realize it or not admitting it. He needs help. How do I get him in? That'll be the question. How do I get him in? And I'll just describe different possibilities, usually about, first of all, not enabling. So how important it is to put a boundary that you are going to uphold. When they see the actual boundary is going to be upheld, they'll often take some action. If they think, this could cost me my relationship, this could cost me the situation I'm in, maybe I better take it more serious. That's one motivation. Another is a kind of a gentle, safe way. Just say, look, I'm happy to get on a phone call for 10, 15 minutes. I just have a chat if he's willing, just to kind of get a sense of what it's like to talk to a therapist. What they realize right away is it's not scary, it's not painful. In fact, I often joke with the women who call me, I say, look, even if he tells you that he's smarter than a therapist and nobody can help him, he'll find out when he comes in that it's going to be really enjoyable. He'll most likely get more enthusiastic than you ever expected him to be, because men really do enjoy therapy once they're in it and they realize that this isn't pulling teeth. This is just talking with someone who might care about me and have something to share, some wisdom to pass on.
I think that's a really important point. Like you said, you might actually enjoy being in a room with somebody who doesn't know you, who has no judgment about you, who will keep your information confidential, and that you really enjoy just letting it all out. Like you also mentioned in the beginning, just getting it out was already a feeling like halfway done in a way. But also one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times is the important role of fitness. And if I'm getting this correctly, you're just coming back to Singapore from Spain, where you have participated in the Ironman 70.3, do I say this correctly, World Championship, where you represented Sweden in the age group of 50 to 54. You have spoken about your 30 kilos weight gain, and now you were representing Sweden for the Ironman. That is an incredible journey in itself. How important was it to get physically active in your journey?
Yeah, it played a huge role. But I basically applied the same thinking as I did for my alcohol problem. Take ownership and ask for help. Then I did that for my marriage. I did that later on also for my son, that relationship. So then I was thinking, what other things are important in my life? Well, triathlon was one of them. But I wasn't very good before. I was struggling, it was difficult and so on. So I thought, well, why don't I surrender this one as well and join sports clubs, associations, and get some coaching. So I reached out to one of the best coaches in the world, someone who's been 8 times in the top 10 in the world in the sport of Ironman, and he mainly just coached professionals. But then I asked him if he would coach someone like me, and he said yes. So I followed for a few years basically the same training plan as he would give to professionals. And I even got so inspired with it that I moved and now live inside the training camp. It's in Phuket, Thailand. So I bought an apartment in the training camp. So where people come and train for a week or 2 weeks, they come from all around the world. That's my home base.
That's where you live now.
That's where I live. So that's part of it. But I would say the physical fitness is just one angle to it. The social aspect is also important. And of course, I'm a Swedish introvert. So in Sweden, we are quite socially distant and we don't really talk much. And we definitely didn't talk about feelings in my family. And then being a comfortable introvert in that aspect and loving to work and so on, I could easily isolate myself and just work all the time. But now making a home base where I also have people all the time, it's always 50 to 100 athletes every day. So I can join sessions and socialize. So I get my social health also through that. So that's why I really, really enjoy it. And that was also a big part of my recovery. When I based myself in Singapore, through the recovery groups, I set up cycling groups and so on. And we actually met at 4:15 a.m. in the morning, and we would cycle for 1.5 hours chatting, and then we'd go to a recovery meeting. And I did that over 1,000 times in Singapore.
Wow.
So that really worked for me to look after myself, both physically and socially.
I think that's important to really approach yourself holistically. The physical aspect is such a good way to even get to the mental part. Like you said, having a community that you go cycling with, having a group that you go running with, it stretches this vulnerability muscle that you have been like talking about. And I think this could also be like a great first step for people who might not be ready to talk about things, but to really feel their belonging, because many people feel lonely and we don't talk about that often enough, especially in the men's group, where I will just say stereotypically, we women, we get together, we talk about our emotions over coffee. Whereas men, not necessarily get together. There's more like sports, but this can be a good entry point for people who are maybe looking for their first step.
that brings us back to, in a way, the original beginning of a journey of someone who's recovering from alcohol. So when they come in, they'll often tell me their situation, and we'll start to explore, what's prompting that. When do you typically find yourself reaching for the drink? And you might remember this acronym, Nick, it's called HALT, H-A-L-T. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We add bored and stressed in there, bored next to lonely, right? But in those states, that's when we're likely going to be reaching out. It's a coping mechanism, right? So what we say to them is, in those states, when you can be aware of that state, this is a time to make that different choice. So how can I address that need in a healthy way? So if it's lonely, I can connect with people, become a part of a group, reach out to my friends. If I'm stressed, I can go ride it off on a bicycle, punch it out in a gym, you know what I mean? So you can see how we can turn that angst into activity towards our health. And that's kind of what Nick's done. Well, not kind of, it's what he's championed for the past 20 years now, or how long you been on this?
8 years recovery.
Oh, is it 8? Okay. I keep thinking it's longer
Yeah.
because I'm so old. All right. Well, it's an amazing journey.
But speaking of championing, you are a leading advocate now. You talk about your journey openly. And like you said, it started all with you posting this viral video out there, and suddenly your story was out. And you have made a purposeful career out of it. It is now really part of you to own this story and to really be an advocate for these people, these groups. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? What is coming up next? And what can we look forward to?
Yeah, so the last couple of years, the company that I spent most of my time on was EGN, Executive Global Network. So it's confidential peer groups for senior executives. We later on also launched groups for entrepreneurs, business owners. So it's a safe place where they can share their work-related challenges and discuss them. So just similar like any challenge we have, there's stigma there's all these kind of issues, and then to share them with like-minded and help each other. So that's what I've done. Built that up in Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia. I now stepped away from that, and my wife, Donna Amelia, is now running the network. And I'm moving on from that. So the last few years, now 2 years, I'm mainly focusing on being a speaker and conducting workshops and coaching. So I'm traveling the world. You can almost say that I'm a nomad. 9 trips to the Maldives by itself in the last 2 years to do trainings there and workshops. And that's a very rewarding journey. On top of that, I also studied at the School of Positive Psychology for 1.5 years, and I'm almost done with a degree in psychotherapy and counseling. So really to be able to support more. And I focus also there on the addiction and suicide prevention, which was the course that led me into this in the first place.
It's incredible. And we don't even have enough time to talk about these topics yet. There's like so much more we would love to uncover, but it seems like we have to get you back to another episode.
But it's so fun to talk about these, because look at the crossovers.
Yeah.
So we started in the counseling arena, then we got into his coaching, my counseling. I was sending my clients to him for coaching. He was sending his clients to me for counseling. I was lecturing at TSPP, the School of Positive Psychology. Now he's studying there, and he'll soon be a psychologist, I guess, counselor. So it's just amazing how many roads we've crisscrossed along the way. So it's been a pleasure. Conclusion.
Some last words of wisdom that you can impart on our listeners.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And the journey has been indeed a full circle. And I really enjoyed our retreat. We also had a retreat in Sentosa 1 weekend, the couples retreat, right?
Well, it was a workshop called Mindful Quest, where people understand the mythology they inherited and why they're playing out these certain roles, which could be the provider role, the maternal mother figure. So we're kind of breaking away from those and discovering who a person really wants to become. And so, yes, Nick and Donna joined that. And thank you for mentioning that. That was a great time in Sentosa.
It was. And the last message then for everyone, and I always share the same. I said, if there's something on your mind, think about who you can talk to about it. It can be your husband, your wife, or it can be someone you just trust. It's just about releasing and taking that first step. And there's so many anonymous ways you can do that. It's also all these support groups, 12-step programs. And the good thing is these days you can do a lot of sessions online. You don't have to go see someone to break your anonymity. as a first step.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you so much, Nick, for being with us and sharing all of your insights, sharing your inspiring journey for us. And I hope this also helped our listeners to really find the courage to take the first steps. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're a champion. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.